What is up, guys? Rick Kackis here, and today we are going to be discussing something I believe is really interesting in the scope of Destiny 2, and that is, where are the factions? And what changes could we see to factions in Destiny 2? Now, the reason I ask this is because, well, we've known three main factions with Dead Orbit, New Monarchy, and Future War Cult for the longest time. Since Destiny came out, they've always had a place in the tower as being vendors that sell us armor and weapons, and you see their logos plastered all over the game. However, the tower is gone. The city is gone. So does that mean that these factions are gone? Well, the simple answer would be no. Certain people survive from all these factions, and then there's a new Monarchy vendor, maybe the same Dead Orbit vendor, maybe that guy survived, and then a new Future War Cult vendor, and we're skippy, we're ready to go for Destiny 2. However, things get a little bit more complicated when you delve into the lore. Now, I'm not a huge lore fanatic, so excuse me if I get a couple of things wrong, but the faction lore for these factions involving the city is really, really interesting. And in fact, it almost makes sense that some of them left and are never coming back because of this event. Or at least have some very interesting opinions and plans regarding what happened with the Cabal Invasion. And here's what I mean. When we look at Dead Orbit's entire philosophy is to flee the city. They believe the city to be inherently unsafe. They're looking for salvation in the stars, in other galaxies. In fact, they're trying to build a star fleet that will let them go into other galaxies entirely and escape the darkness. They don't believe that in humanity in its entirety huddling in one place, which in fairness to them, they might have been a little bit right about that. Everyone in one place wasn't the best idea for an invasion by a Cabal force. So they could look at this as their really reasoning and showcasing that they were right all along. That the city wasn't safe and that you need to find salvation in the stars. They could just say, peace, we're gone. Dead Orbit is leaving now. We should have done this earlier. This is the last straw and we are gone. There is another really interesting case involving the lore of Future War Cult as well. Future War Cult is apparently in control of a golden age technology which, in essence, lets you peer through timelines. It's reported that 44 people have used this golden age technology that Future War Cult is in control of, and they see not many good things. A lot of them see the darkness winning. 13 of these 44 people apparently have reported the city falling. That's why Future War Cult is called really Future War Cult. They're always predicting future wars. They predict constant aggression and basically no salvation. And so that's really interesting when you think of that lore perspective, that Future War Cult kind of knew this was going to happen. They knew that the city falling was a possibility in apparently 13 different timelines. So they may have been preparing for this in some way. And even more interestingly, if they were right about this, they may know what's going to happen next. If they know which timeline is correct, they may know the next thing that's going to happen, which is really interesting. And so Future War Cult, if they do stick around, could play a huge factor in upcoming storylines and potentially expansions. And then lastly, there's New Monarchy. New Monarchy's lore is all about them trying to unite humanity under one benevolent, impeachable leader, which they wanted to be Zavala, but Zavala kept refusing. So New Monarchy is all about bringing humanity together and uniting in the last city and kind of abolishing these silly faction disputes and all of that stuff. They're going to be pretty devastated when humanity is at its lowest point, almost ever. This city is destroyed. Everything New Monarchy has worked for to give people rights in the city, to kind of develop this civilization within the city, that's all gone. So they might just be in complete disarray right now. And that, from a lore perspective, gives a really interesting gameplay perspective of what might be happening within Destiny 2, is that these factions, the answer for them just setting up shop again may not be that simple. There's a lot more complicated things going on here. However, with all that being said, it does appear that the 3 factions from Destiny are returning in some capacity in Destiny 2. And that's because we see their symbols represented during Destiny 2 gameplay, both in armor, like this new Monarchy symbol on armor, and on weapons, like this new Monarchy symbol on this Hawk sniper or scout rifle. So you can have faction armor and faction weapons in Destiny 2, likely going to be similar when compared to Destiny 1. However, we could see changes for how you earn your faction rep, what kind of faction weapons and armor are available, and maybe even faction exclusive perks or sights or whatever in Destiny 2, and that's pretty exciting. Now, there is some very interesting things going on here with the equalization of representation, in the sense that, alright, Dead Orbit does appear. We see Dead Orbit a couple of times on this Hunter. New Monarchy appears, but New Monarchy appears again and again. New Monarchy is absolutely everywhere. When I was combing through the gameplay to get these screenshots to confirm that the factions were returning, I got New Monarchy after New Monarchy after New Monarchy, and I didn't even grab every single New Monarchy screenshot I saw. I stopped after a point. So New Monarchy is absolutely everywhere within the gameplay. Whereas Future War Cult, I snagged one screenshot. Right here on this Hunter's leg, you can see the Future War Cult symbol, but that's kind of it. I'm sure there's, maybe 1 or 2 more that I missed. I'm only human, but it really did seem that New Monarchy was disproportionately represented, and that is pretty interesting. Furthermore, and the real reason we went over the lore earlier, is that these interactions and how the factions perceive the takedown of the city by the Cabal is going to come up, and you're going to learn probably more about these factions than ever before. And that's because of the introduction of adventures. These are a new thing in Destiny 2. They're basically side quests. They're quests given out by NPCs, and apparently these quests can be substantial, having their own mechanics and encounters. So if you have NPCs giving out tons of side quests in Destiny 2, and if you can see by some of these map screenshots, there's a lot of symbols for adventures. There seems to be quite a bit of them. The faction NPCs and doing adventures for these different factions is likely going to be a big part of Destiny 2. Maybe you'll actually get to experience that Golden Age machine Future War Cult has. Maybe they'll hook you up to it and you can see a future timeline. That would be really cool. There's also the question of, is there going to be a 4th faction, another faction introduced, or perhaps a faction that has risen from the ashes of the city, or even a faction that has existed outside the city. The whole storyline is that you go to somewhere in the European Dead Zone, you meet Hawthorne, the character who's been surviving outside the city walls, and then you start to set up kind of a new home for humanity. There's potentially a faction, or at least a group of people that sell exclusive weapons and armor that has already been existing there. And you meet them and interact with them, and they have a vendor that sells weapons and armor, and they're essentially a 4th faction. Perhaps not a faction in the traditional lore sense, but act as another faction. And perhaps the weapons they have, have tape on them and are kind of gritty and covered in dirt, and the kind of weapons you would expect to find kind of on the frontier. That's another interesting possibility. We do see symbols like this kind of circular, maybe traveler symbol on this Hunter. I'm not quite sure what this is. Maybe you guys in the comments know what that is, but we don't know. I could easily go and find a bunch of symbols we don't know of right yet in Destiny 2 gameplay, but they could just be cool designs. Right? We've had that in Destiny. We have cloaks and stuff with cool designs. I have a Titan mark with an axe on it, just because it looks cool. right? It doesn't necessarily represent a faction, it doesn't necessarily represent the Crucible or an activity or something like that. It just looks cool. And that is probably going to happen again in Destiny 2, so combing over the footage and looking for symbols we don't yet know doesn't necessarily mean anything. And so guys, that's it for the video. It does look like the 3 factions are returning in Destiny 2 in varying capacities, and it does also look like you're going to get to learn a lot more about them through the new adventure system. And guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny and Destiny 2 content, be sure to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickKackis. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you can also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.